So we have to remember the story of Chanuka as it says in the Gemara and in the Rambam and in the Midrashim and every Jewish source known to Jews ever. In the stories like this, people seem to have forgotten the story. They have a lot of pshutim, chassidische pshutim, and toiras and maases, and even the story of the candle is only one story and one pshat. But the story that actually says in the Gemara many times, in the Mishnah and the Gemara, is that there were some evil goyim. The Rosh was called Antiochus, but both included they're known as Yevunim. And they, for some reason, it doesn't say why, but it doesn't matter to us why. That's a question for historians or psychologists of Mr. Antiochus. For some reason, they decided to outlaw Judaism. Where are you? And what does Judaism mean? It means mitzvahs, Chodesh, Shabbos, Mila, specific mitzvahs, but basically the mitzvahs that they identified as the most Jewish things. They were interested in outlawing it. They were interested in saying you're not allowed to. They didn't let us be makriv to Hashem in the Beis HaMikdash. They said you should put a statue of Zeus in the Beis HaMikdash, and they actually did for 2 years. It says in Daniel, but I'm not getting into that. Zeus, the Gorichische god, had a tzaylim b'hayachol for 3 years, for 2.5 years, for almost 3 exact years, from Chufay Kislev 3 years before. There was a statue of Zeus in the Eichel that was supposed to be makriv to him Chazayrim. And I'm not getting into stories that don't say in Chazal. This says in Chazal. It says in the Pusik, actually, if you know how to read. It says in Pusik. That's a Shiketz Mashayim of Daniel. It says that 3 years. It's a Pusik in Daniel. Anyways. But it's also mentioned in the Mishnah. The Avnei Mizbech, Shiketz an Sheyavan, right? It's mentioned in the Mishnah that the Yevunim were Metames HaHaychel. And of course, the Gemara takes one little aspect of that and talks about how the Shemim was Tumah and there's a mass, and that's why we have Nairas Chanukah. That's all fine of all. But if you look a little broader in Chazal, I'm not saying anywhere outside, you see that this is a mass that was Gzairis Shmad, Gzairis Kneged, the Kiyama Mitzvahs, very schlechte Zach. And of course, not only Gzairis Shmad, like the Rambam says, no goyim are really only ideologically against Jews. They also wanted to rape our daughters and steal our money and so on. It always goes together, because the temple had a lot of power and so on. So it says, it's the month in the Midrashim of Chanuka. They even told people you're not allowed to close your door because they didn't want you to have any privacy. So they should always be able to peek in and steal or take whatever they want. Get is a big tzorah. And it's a tzorah begashmis aberachnias, a gzeres shmad, known as gzeres shmad. There were several gzeres shmads in the history of Klal Yisrael. In the Gemara, there's talks many times about Hadrian's gzeres shmad, which is also the same. He hated both the Jews as a religion and the Jews as a people. Tried to outlaw the Jewish religion, and known as Hadrianus Chiktami in the Gemara, in English Hadrian. And the first historically known Gzeres Shmad was Antiochus Gzeres Shmad. Like the historians literally don't know where he got the idea from.
Hadrian ethnically hated Jews?
Well, he had some Jewish people that he liked, yeah. But basically.
You don't know where they got it from? Like Pari never tried to do that?
Pari was before we recorded, whatever, there's recorded history, but Pari was different. No, we don't see Pari as there was no Jews yet. Jews came out of Mitzrayim. It's different mass.
No, because
Medif doesn't think Gzairis Shmad. No, Pari again. Klal Yisrael was invented after Yitzchok Mitzrayim. It's really weird to talk about Pari as having Gzaira against Judaism. Yeah, you could say it like this. But I don't think it's the same. But it doesn't make much of a difference to me right now. Point is, this was a tzura, and it's a tzura for who? For the Jewish people. The Jewish people are the people that like to do bris milah, and that have bris milah and have Shabbos and have Chodesh. And these apikar Rishoim, not apikar Samchas, these Rishoim, these are goyim Rishoim. No, it's very important. These goyim Yevunim, we call them Yevunim, although they're not necessarily really ethnically Yevunim. We don't care. They call them Yevunim. And they're the Rishoim, and it's like it says in the Alanissim. There's the Rishoim and the Tmeim and the how do you call them? Zaydim. A ganze list of bad things that they are. And this is the mass of Chanuka, is Nasata Geborim B'yat Chelushim, V'rabim B'yat Matim, B'eked, Tmeim B'yat Tahirim, V'rishom B'yat Tzadikim, V'zaydim B'yat Tzadikah. And this is all synonyms for Jews, for the Greeks in the hands of the Jews. It's all different ways of saying that. Okay, very important. This is the mass of the Gemara. So there's the good guys are the Yid, and the bad guys are the Goyim, the Yevunim, and the Yevunim, they were Sai Rishuim and Sai Rishuim. They wanted to kill us and not let us be Jews. And we won. Okay, this is the mass. And this was the story that you knew forever, and they celebrated it. And of course, there was also this nest with the Lecht, and that's why we have Lecht. But I've included this is the mass of Chanuka. Then, about 500 years ago, maybe a little more, 600 already, 15th century, people discovered, the Yidden never read it. This wasn't, a little before there was also Yosifin that has some of these stories. But for the most part, we don't find anyone connecting this with Chanuka almost. The second kind of story until very late, like what we call the modern period. People rediscovered these books that were written by Hashmonaim or people of their crowd, but were preserved by the Christian church. And they were retranslated to Hebrew, or Jews learned how to read Latin or Greek or whatever it was. And they found there's a whole different masse. There's not the bad guys being the Goyim and the good guys being the Eden, and the Eden won. Like ganz andere masse. There were a bunch of groups of Eden. Firstly, a discovery. If you don't read Josephus, you basically don't know it in general, but there were these bad Eden, and they actually even have a name called Mesyavnim. If you could search in Leitzerach Achmor and Barilan, the word Mesyavnim was invented in the 18th century. Of course, the ancient word is Hellenizers or something like that, but to translate it into Hebrew, the word Mesyavnim, you go to any Misadrush, they tell you about Mesyavnim, this is a Maskile Shavar, the Maskilim invented it, this word. I'm serious. And not only that, this story, this whole rediscovery of this story, and they say, no, it's Bechalnat, there's a whole different story. If you actually read these books, you see there's a whole different story. In other words, of course, these bad goyim still, but the main story, if you read Sefer Chashmonaim and if you read others, is that there were these Jews that were Mekirev Lamalchus, and they wanted to be Moitze Chaim B'nei HaGoyim or whatever, they thought it was worth it, and so on. And they started to stop, they didn't want to be Jews anymore, they wanted to be successful Hellenes, and they started bringing Hellenism, and then they somehow got the Goyim on their side, and that's how the whole thing started. And then there were these Kanuim from Median that got mad, and they broke the Mizbayach of that guy, and Bekitza, that started the whole revolution, and somehow they won. This is the mass of a shtayt in Sefer Chashmonaim, and it's also in Sefer Yosifin, and in Josephus, and in all these outside sources. No Yid ever told this story on Chanukah until about 500 years ago. And then, when it was discovered, it was not considered, the Frimi Yid didn't read these books, and probably still don't really. And they still celebrate the Yom Tov of the Geborim B'Yad Chalushim V'Rab B'Yad Matim and so on. But very weirdly, and this, I think the Maral was the first one to do this. The Maral actually read all these Sforim Chatzayim, of course. Especially was very conscious about the different views of history that the Sforim Chatzayim have and Chazal have. And he... Okay, ich weiß, ich sage nicht, but it's a Karsis. And... the Maral, I think, is the first one to do this Ma'apach, and he read these books, and he said, now he did like a gagal gag shtickle. It's backwards, really. I'm trying to show why it's ironic. And he said, so really Chanukah is not about the Eden, the good Eden that want to keep Shabbos, and the bad goyim that don't let them keep Shabbos and want to kill their children. It's about the bad Eden not letting us keep Shabbos. And not only that, he didn't really have any bad deed not letting him keep Shabbos. So he did a further transformation, which is totally ahistorical, but that's another discussion. But he did a further transformation and said that it's the bad deed who tell us that keeping Shabbos is less important, and it's more important to have correct thoughts or whatever. And since he identified those bad deed with the actual deed that told him this whole story. Because these Apikaris, they're the ones that rediscovered this like historical version of Chanukah, which has the bad deed and the good deed. And since then, since the Maral, and we have this Apikarsische version of Chanukah that talks not about the Geborim B'Yad Chalushim, the Yidden, and the Tzadikim, T'mayim B'Yad Toyim. The Rambam actually has a letter in the Geras Hashmad where he's very mad at someone that said there's such a thing as a bad Jew, even the Jew that converts to Islam, literally, because of Me'oines. And of course, Oines doesn't, by the way, everyone is very confused about this. The Rambam was one of the first ones that was very clear about this, but he invented Tinnik Shanishma. Oines doesn't mean only if the guy is standing there and forcing you to be a guy. If you're living in Berlin and the only way to become a doctor is to be a Shmadzich, it's so Oines. If you're Oimid Ben Esayim, it's like a Tzaddik, it's a Kiddush Hashem, but it's Oines. The Rambam says you're Putte. You can't be Mechav, you're Oines. You can't have Chishdan on a you can't have Tanas on your It's Mamish Oines. In other words, the guy is shildik, not the Yid, right? So, and therefore, the Rambam says that he's very mad at someone that wrote a Shiva to say, we don't know who the guy is, maybe you know. Some Frimayid, was?
Because then it means him.
Or the Rambam himself? That first hold like that? Okay, so, there was one guy that wrote a Shiva that was highest, you're being over a culture, a killer basically, in order, nefesh or whatever, and you're basically os Yidden. You might as well stop doing the three things that there's like crypto Jews that they light candles in a jar Friday night because they're still Jews. Was Yid, was Yid, was goy. And the Rambam against this point was very mad, I'm not getting into that whole story and the whole this and the halacha and the theology and everything, but he said that this is not a way to go. And he says, what do you mean? Even if you're, this is where we get this thing, right? Even if you're over a cult, you still have to wash negelvasser. It doesn't literally say that mushal, but something like that. In other words, even if let's say it was a bad thing, it doesn't mevatel the good things. But even more than that, he says that someone that becomes a goy ba'oines, or ba'oines because everyone is a goy and he also wants to be a goy, he is the tzaddik from the Alanism, the Lushna Rambam. The Rambam says, what do you mean? This is the story of Chanuka. And the Rambam actually also read some history, so he did know that there were many Yidden, or maybe even most Yidden, that were on the side of the Yevunim. And the Rambam says, the tzaddikim and the tehorim of Alanism are those Yidden, not the few Chashmenuim from Median. They're everyone. Why are they everyone? Because they're Anisim. Either literally Anisim or culturally Anisim. And that's Shivas Rambam.
But isn't it just saying that, like, as usual, they're Jewish collaborators? More than that, that's Jewish.
No, this is exactly. There's no Jewish collaborators. There's goyim that make some Jews be collaborators. You're blaming the victim. Of course, there's Jewish collaborators because I know someone. I know Psaruv. He said he was once by like some social. How do you call it? One of these like psychotherapy group. And one of them asked, and someone guy said, "Okay, imagine if you were in the Holocaust. What would you, like? What would be? Who would you? Which character you would be?" And the guy said, "What do you mean? I would be a capo." Push it. It's the most rational thing to be. But that's not the Yidden's fault that they're kapos. It's the Nazis' fault that they're kapos.
Yeah, but there are consequences to that.
It's kind of fine, but this is very important, and I think this is very deliberate. The Chum were not entirely ignorant of history, and they very deliberately tell the story in which all the Yidden are good and all the Goyim are bad, and the Yidden are bad. This Chanukah is not about the good Yidden winning against the bad Yidden. Chaz v'shulam. It's about the good Yidden winning against the Goyim, and this story about the good and bad Yidden we got from Goyim, and Nishna from Vecha Goyim from Christians, who their whole thing is to have good Yidden and bad Yidden. And there, of course, the good Yidden, and then some people like the Maral adapted this story, and then we got it from Chassidim and a bunch of and like later people, Jews, unfortunately got very happy with this like very Goyish way of thinking about this, like there's good Jews and bad Jews. And everyone, of course, thinks that he's the good Jew, and the story of Chanuka is about that. But Levi Yediyah, this is the Apikars Shemasa. This is not the traditional Jewish Mass. The traditional Jewish Mass is that there's only good Yidden, and we celebrate the good Yidden winning about the God. Of course, there's Yidden that Nebuch are also ba'onis. That's part of the Tzura. It's part of the Goy's problem, not part of the Yidden's problem.
Okay. They're good Yidden, and they're better Yidden.
No, I'm saying in the context of Chanuka, of course, there's tzaddikim arishum in the Yidden also. Nobody's denying that. But in all the Yom Tov, man, there's no, but very important. Holidays are not for one group to be winning. That's why Yad Kislev is because of Yom Tov, right? Because it's one group, a Jewish group against another Jewish group. There's no such Yom Tov. And there were, the Chachamim were against the Tzaddikim and things like that, and they, even though if there were such Yom Tov, they were mevatel them. Yeah, there might have been. Yeah, they were mevatel this Yom Tov for a reason. There's no such Yom Tov survived. Only the ones where there's the Yidden against everyone else. I mean, the Yidden against all the Goyim, or whatever, the bad Goyim. You can't have a Yom Tov where I tzaddik won and my enemy lost. That's literally a tanis, something you should have a tanis for, even if you won. Like,
can we talk about that concept you just?
Sure.
I just want to finish this first.
That's all. That's what I said. So if you hear someone saying Chanukah is about not having this culture or that culture, or that means the Yid, that you should know that that's the Mesyavnische version of Chanukah. That's not the Yiddish version of Chanukah.
That all it is that we overcame another culture?
We overcame the Goyim that didn't let us keep Shabbos. What's wrong with that story? It's a beautiful story.
Except they were Yidden who didn't let us keep Shabbos.
That's Goyim. The Goyash Beyana Yid. The Goyim that made those Yidden. So now we don't blame those Yidden. We blame the Goyim.
No, so what you
very important.
So someone is asked what they would be in the Holocaust. Said, okay, it would make sense that someone would be a capo. So now if they became a capo and they did what they did or turned in someone else's kids, why should they be held accountable if they did?
They should not. The Nazis should be held accountable for all of these things.
True.
In fact, like it says in the Chassidish Sunim, the Mitzvah made us bad, made us evil. It's not our fault, it's their fault. I know people, whatever, I've heard people that were that, and nobody had tanis on them. People were Zachmashadech with a guy that I know a story.
Such a guy.
More than one story.
Such a very.
There were people that was Zachmashadech with the guy that sent their family to the thing. I understood that but what can you do? It's not really it's really not his fault. I don't know. I'm sorry for saying this is not really the point. It's a whole different discussion.
No, I know. Because this is something that
I think it's important for a good society not to keep up this. You can't have an internal civil war going on. It doesn't work.
think that was the point of Hanukkah, maybe, to not have that. So we
exactly. That's the point of the Jewish story, not the Messianic story. So, anyways, what do you think? That's my Torah on Hanukkah.
It was always a question that bothered me. It's like, okay, if you have somebody who was a Wehrmacht soldier, and he committed atrocities because he was under orders from the SS, can we hold it against him?
No, we don't have to hold it against him personally. That's why we have collective punishment. Okay, but I can't get into this. This is too controversial. That's a different discussion.
Has its own issues.
Yeah, but there's no. That's different. Of course, that's different. It's the other side of the same problem. But I understand. But this is.
Can we have a share on this one time, like maybe?
Yeah, but without a video.
No video.
After we finish the.
Could have as many as you want. I don't have anything. I could just say controversial things and make you think. I don't have a solution. I'm not like the guy that has a solution for these things.
Yeah, I'm sure the way you say it's thought out. So
I've thought about this.
I was trying to make sense of it myself.
But wait, I want to. Yeah, 1 second. No, it's important like to realize this, and I think people don't realize it. People, for example, example that I've been noticing these past few days, people like saying like. Moshe Mendelssohn's children converted to Christianity, and that proves that his ideas were wrong. You know what that proves? That the Nazis were there a long time before the Nazis came. Why did they convert? The guy wanted a job. He wouldn't get a job without converting. The guy didn't convert because his father had a Torah that said you shouldn't convert. Just the opposite. His father had whole debates explaining why I shouldn't convert famously, whatever. Point is that it's very unfair to blame a Jew for another Jew converting. It's never a Jew's fault. It's always a guy's fault.
It's technically a right fakir.
I'm not getting into that. But I'm saying it's not their fault. Meshiga, they were in society. They wanted to be successful. Now, you could say you should not want to be successful. You're exaggerating now. But the kids are. No, I'm not getting into that. That's another point. I'm saying, even if it's an argument, it's an argument against the German Goyim. They pretended to be all liberal and nice. And the vow that they don't let you into university without converting. Even Mendelssohn, they tried to get to convert. Man, it's not only his case.
Yeah.
They had a years-long campaign. They tried to get the guy to convert. Yeah. So what do you mean? Gonna blame a Yid? This is like mamish.
Moshe Mendelssohn is the biggest Rav in history.
Okay.